And Recollection would say, if you die before you die, then you will not die when you die. That's a statement.
Moolam sameksha yatra gamyata sarvesha margam tadhaiva pravritti. Moolam sameksha yatra gamyata sarvesha margam tadhaiva pravritti.
Sisters and brothers, a very hearty welcome to each one of you to this monthly recollection in the month of November. As all of us are well aware, in the month of November, in accordance with a Catholic tradition, we dedicate this month to all the dear departed ones, remembering each one of them fondly in our memories and praying for them that they may enjoy eternal rest. I would like to nuance and share with you a few points about this very concept of death as understood in the Christian and scriptural point of view. As normal, many of us might have read many books on death. I have read that very interesting book written by Robin Sharma titled, Who Will Cry When You Die? This is a collection of articles, thoughts that are befitting for each day's reflection. One of the articles in this famous book is Having a Living Funeral. And in this particular article, Robin Sharma mentions about the life of a Maharaja, a great king, who every day practiced his own death in his personal life. How did he do this? He would get up early in the morning. He will sing songs, dance, and make merry and say, I have lived fully, I have lived fully. Of course, for a young man like Robin Sharma, that was something very strange. He asked his father, what does this mean? Why is he doing this? His father explained to him, he does it in order to remind himself about the mortality of his own life. We are all short-lived. Later, in another book, he would mention the maximum number of days that we would live on the face of the earth is 25,550 days, 70 years. Yes, my brothers and sisters, certain times great people remind us of the reality of death. It is said, the great philosopher Plato, as he was on the deathbed, one of his disciples came to him asking him, would you mind to summarize the great life's work that you wrote, the dialogues? And Plato summarized it in 2 words, practice dying. Practice dying. Yes, it's equally important for a young person to remember that he will die, just as in the case of a very old person who every day counts on his death. Yes, my brothers and sisters, this is a call that is given to each one of us, very specially by the Church, to remind ourselves about the reality of death. It's not about running away from death, but to encounter death meaningfully. All of us are well aware, in accordance with the Catholic tradition of our belief system, we believe that death is only a passing stage. The passage that stimulates me so much is the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 1. Paul says, "This body in which I am is merely a tent, but God has prepared for me a house in heaven." a house that will never get destroyed. Death, as all of us are well aware, is a reality of our life. At the same time, it's very difficult to encounter it. I sometimes ask myself the question, Jesus himself does this. He says, death is a passing stage. At the same time, he himself cried when he was at the tomb of Lazarus. Everyone encounters the painful reality of leaving the dear one and going away, or the dear one going away from them. I remind myself about that very interesting incident narrated in the life of Nikos Kazantzakis. It is said, Kazantzakis, when he wrote that autobiographical novel titled Report to Greco, he gave it first time to his own life partner Helen to read it. In this book, he has written something very solid about death. He mentions, I'm laying down my weapons. Yes, I'm laying down all that I possess and have for myself. Smell, touch, feelings, everything. I lay it down in order to return to the cave. It's not because I'm not interested in it. It is not because I'm not capable of it. It is just because the sun has set and I need to go. It is said, Helen was inconsolable reading those statements of Kazantzakis, and she could not complete reading the whole novel. But Kazantzakis tells her, why are you so much worried? Writes to one of his friends in the night, Helen is inconsolable, but she must know, as you yourself should know, death is at the doorstep. All of us should go away from our dear ones. My dear sisters and brothers, in spite of the fact that Kazantzakis wrote this statement about death, he himself was afraid of death. It is said in the same book, Report to Greco, he mentions, when I am about to die, I would go out into the streets, and there I would meet with everyone who comes across me, and I will beg them, would you mind to give me a quarter of an hour from your life? And they will surely ask me, what for? And I will tell them, to complete another 10 more years so that I can finish all my writings. Everyone wants to perpetuate life. Everyone wants to live. No one wants to encounter the reality of death. Yes, my sisters and brothers, every spiritual master on the face of the earth teaches us that we should be prepared to encounter death. In the western side of the world, for that matter, death and writing about it, speaking about it, perhaps would be considered as a defeatist mindset. They would rather encourage one to speak about perpetuation of success, life always, health, wealth, and positions. But when we turn to the eastern side of the world, our gurus and masters would tell us, stop, be silent, realize the coldness inside of yourself, and know death is just like changing the old cloth and putting on a new cloth. We have to be ready to encounter death in our daily life. It is here that I would like to apply some of those biblical statements, especially made by Jesus, in order to have some kind of a clarity about this concept of death. One of the statements that Jesus made in the gospel touches me very deeply. He says, do not call anyone fool. According to Jesus, when you call another man or another person a fool, you have already murdered him. Do not call anyone a fool. But is it merely a slip of tongue that the same Jesus calls a man in the gospel fool? It may never be. We have that beautiful parable narrated by Jesus about a rich fool. As we read the Gospel of Luke chapter 12 verse 16 onwards, we have a narration about a man who had been so much taken up by the immediacy of his life. Very clearly the Gospel narrates he was a rich man. The whole surrounding areas were struggling perhaps with famine, but he had sufficient grains and he garnered everything in his barn. And he tells himself, enjoy, make merry. I have collected everything for you to enjoy forever. But it is said that very same night, the Lord appeared to him and told him, fool, this night your soul shall be taken away from you. Whose shall all these then be? Yes, foolishness in accordance with the gospel understanding is to get away from the realities of your life. And death, in fact, is one of those realities that we need to encounter without a second thought. Everyone who collects for oneself, thinking that he is for eternity, needs to become aware that life is short-lived. Eternity is a higher perspective. In fact, what we notice in the case of this rich man is not that he is not aware of death, but he has a fear for death. It is said the last film that was shot by Charlie Chaplin was a verbal one. Until then, all his films were without any verbal communication. And in this particular film, Charlie Chaplin makes a statement: all men are afraid of death. All men are afraid of death. Of course, he means all people are afraid of death and are trying to run away from the reality of death. In the context of the psychology of the time, people would call this as a kind of a displacement. What is displacement? We would find displacement is a kind of an adjustment that a person is making in one's life. Instead of thinking about the lofty ideals that one can hold and should hold in one's life, one turns towards the trivial things of life. For example, when a student is well aware that he or she has to prepare well for the examination, instead of doing that, he or she turns towards trivial things of going for a picnic or going for a film or anything of that sort. Getting oneself away from the true path that one needs to take, one becomes lower in status in one's own existence. This, in fact, is considered by psychology of the time as displacement. One places oneself at the wrong place and thinks that everything is very fine. When we speak in terms of spirituality, for that matter, we need to understand spirituality always holds for life that is prolonged and eternal. There are three dimensions in the context of spirituality. One is a meaningful youthhood. Secondly, a graceful old age. And the third, naturally, is a peaceful death. In fact, my brothers and sisters, all of us are unknowingly or knowingly every day preparing for our death. If we are persons who recite the rosary every day, we know very well at least 50 times we mention, pray for us at the time of our death. Are we conscious about this prayer that we are making? We are intending to say, we are helpless. We need your intercession, Mother Mary, at the side of Jesus. We pray indirectly even for a peaceful death. When we consider this aspect of the foolishness of this rich man, we need to also think about the opposite dimension of it. I would say in the gospel we have someone who is wise in understanding what death is. And that is the person known as Joseph of Arimathea. It is said he had a tomb constructed in his garden. Sisters and brothers, remember, the garden is the joyous moments of one's life. It's about a wonderful family. It's about a relationship that I create. It's about the friendships and relationships that I have in my life. It's about the wealth that I enjoy. In spite of all these good things that I enjoy in my life, there is a tomb that I have built in this garden. I know very well, consciously, that I will not be enjoying it all through in my life. There should be a place for a peaceful death, a tomb. Remember, and Jesus was laid in that tomb, in that garden of the wealth and possession, at the same time, in that eternity of his life. Therefore, my sisters and brothers, having seen this aspect of death as something that we just cannot change, I would like to take up 3 points that we could consider as important for living our life meaningfully. The very first thing that we need to do is to put our house in order. I take a very interesting passage from the Old Testament. It is from the 2 Kings chapter 20. It's about King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah was on his deathbed, and God tells him, "You are going to die. But before you die, you must do one thing. Put your house in order." That's a statement that is given to Hezekiah because he needs still to work on something that he has not completed yet. Put your house in order. Of course, there are 2 houses that we can depict here. One is a domestic house, and the other one is my own spiritual house. From the point of view of a domestic house, one needs to realize certain things that need to be done. What about my relationship with my husband, my wife, my children? Have I done all that needs to be done in the context of my house, where perhaps 4 or 5 people are encountering me every day? I have read a very interesting book titled The Last Lecture, written by Randy Pausch. A very interesting man who unfortunately had to die in his middle age due to pancreatic cancer. But he decided to do one thing. I will write certain things that are necessary that my children should know. He writes about how he lived his life, how he loved them. But in this book, he makes one very interesting statement. He says, in cards play, you just can't demand for the cards that you wish to have in your hand. You get what comes. But on the other side, it is you who decide what card or which card you need to play next. That is a choice that you have to make in your life. Therefore, put your house in order. In the recent times, very interestingly, I happened to hear about the death of a little boy of 8 years, about whom a priest mentioned to me. It is said, this particular child, before he was about to die due to a serious illness, called his elder sister and his younger brother near to his deathbed and told them, "Do not quarrel with each other." After saying that, he decided one thing. He told, "All my toys I divide among you. Play well and enjoy well." My God, just 8 years of age, where did he get this wisdom to decide these things? He puts his house in order at the age of 8. In villages, we know very well, we see how sometimes when an old man is dying, he tries to get everything settled. He would tell his children to call that particular person with whom he had some enmity and brings him home. He embraces him, asks him pardon, forgives him, and then he dies. Put your house in order. Yes, my sisters and brothers, This is one of the very important things that we need to do in our lives. Every day of our lives, we should be conscious about what we are doing and not doing. Activities and inactivities of our lives. We need to be responsible about it, because there is a house that is around us who are looking at us for hope and chance in life. But this putting the house in order also demands an interior purification of my life. When I come back to myself, I understand there is a cleanliness that I need to have inside of myself. Remember those words of Jesus when he said, "It's not that you should wash the cup from its outside, wash the inside of the cup, so that all what comes from inside will be pure and crystal clear." That makes you someone different. That's precisely the reason that a young man from Nazareth once told, "What's the use of this life if you have lost your soul? You gain everything else, but if you have lost your soul, have you not lost your life?" The call is to eternity. Put your house in order. A second dimension that we need to take care in order to live our life meaningfully, conscious about our death, is to die before we die. Die before you die. That's very important. I've heard about the statement from Jalaluddin Rumi, who said, "To die before you die means to live your life in its fullness." C.S. Lewis would say, "To die before you die means to have the fruits of your life well received in life." Eckhart Tolle would say, "To die before you die means to have the secrets of life enjoyed already." But most interestingly, Andrei Holesek would say, "If you die before you die, then you will not die when you die." That's a statement. This exactly is what Jesus said in the gospel. If you die before you die, then you will not die when you die. Jesus said, "Be born again." To be born again, you need to die once at least. That death is to oneself. The death to my subjectivity. The death to my greed. The death that I need to have in my personal assessment of the other. The negativity that I hold against the other. I need to die to myself. It is said, when Francis of Assisi was lying down on the ground to die, Claire was so sad. She was crying aloud, and Francis asked her, "Is death so bad that you cry so loud? Was this life so great that you should cry like this?" And then he says, "Come, Sister Death, let me embrace you." Yes, my sisters and brothers, to die before you die means to be free from all bondages. And finally, I would say we should encounter a natural death. Jesus in the gospel mentions about the grain of wheat that falls down and decays. No fruit or no production can ever be expected until and unless you die by decaying yourself. Human death, in fact, is that. The reality of death always invites us to become aware the short journey that we make here on earth is a decadence to our own physicality and a newness to the spiritual well-being that we would be enjoying in eternity. That's why the gospel ends with a very interesting statement. Why do you seek the living among the dead? The gospel speaks about the empty tomb, and Jesus says, "I am the door. Pass through me so that you can sit at my lap and enjoy eternity." Sisters and brothers, I invite you in this month of November to be a little more realistic about your life, that you may become more conscious about this reality of death, not to get frightened, not to run away from it, but to encounter it meaningfully when it comes on our way. May Jesus help us to die before we die. Amen.
मूलं समीक्ष्य यत्र गम्यताम् सर्वेषां मार्गं तथैव प्रवृत्तिः